Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. We're recording episode 191 here for you today. We're doing our top 10 NFL Power Rankings 2.0 here for week number 4. We continue to do these bi-weekly. If you're new here, pretty simple. We're just going to run through. We're each going to have our top 10 teams in the NFL. We're going to have our own lists, and we're just going to go through why we have which teams where. And if you enjoy the video, if you enjoy what we're doing here, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on audio platforms, leave us a 5-star rating and review. But before we get into it, joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing, man?
Boy, oh boy, do we have a great episode for you guys today. Our NFL Power Rankings, again, we'll be doing this bi-weekly. So after each even numbered week of the NFL season, we will be doing some form of power rankings and or tiers, depending on where the season is. Before we get into any of that, though, the baseball playoffs have been going on since the start of yesterday. We have 4 wild card series, and I just want to do a quick recap of what we've seen so far in those series. Our first series was between the number 6 seed in the American League, the Texas Rangers, and the number 3 seed, the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rangers swept that series, and they'll move on to the division series. They absolutely dismantled Tampa Bay. In fact, Tampa Bay looked more like a team that lost 99 games in those 2 games than they did a team that won 99 games, which they did in the regular season. The Rangers will advance to play the top-seeded team in the American League, the Baltimore Orioles, in the division series. That starts on Saturday. The Texas Rangers, one of the new teams to this year's playoffs, advance past the Tampa Bay Rays. The second series in the American League, we had the Minnesota Twins and the Toronto Blue Jays. And after 19 years of torture, after 19 years without a single playoff victory, the Minnesota Twins strung together not 1, but 2 victories over the Toronto Blue Jays at home in Minnesota to move on to the division series. Their pitching was absolutely lights out. Now, if you're Toronto, that's 2 straight appearances in the postseason in the wild card series, and you've won 0 games. That's a little bit of a disappointment for as talented as that team is. Next up for the Twins, though, they will get the defending World Series champions and the kings of the American League for the past half decade, the Houston Astros. Game 1 of that series also starts on Saturday. In the National League, we have the Diamondbacks and the Brewers. The Diamondbacks are another new team to this year's playoffs. The 6th-seeded Arizona shut down the Snakes. They shut down the Central champions, the Brewers, and they set up an all NL West divisional series with the Los Angeles Dodgers, who have been there, done that. Merrill Kelly will get game 1. Zach Gallen will start game 2. And I believe that series also starts on Saturday. And then finally, the most dangerous Philadelphia Phillies have just wrapped up their series, sweeping another new team to the playoffs, the Miami Marlins, winning tonight's game 7-0. And what do we get in the division series? It's what we've all wanted. The Phillies will take on their NL East rival, the Atlanta Braves, in the NLDS. So again, we'll get Rangers, Orioles, we'll get Twins, Astros, we'll get Snakes, Dodgers, and we will get Phillies, Braves. All sweeps in the wild card series, but we are set up for the divisional series, and I will be doing a preview of those series either tomorrow or Friday. So there you go. That's what's been happening in baseball. Now we can get to the NFL.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Now let's start off with our number 10 team in our power rankings. This week, I went with the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 10. They still don't have things clicking quite yet, but I liked what I saw defensively. I think when you look at the overall sample size of the year, the defense has been solid. It's the offense that needs to pick it up a little bit more. And I don't think it's a Trevor Lawrence thing. I don't think it's a Doug Peterson thing. I just think there are some, you know, attention to detail type of issues going on in Jacksonville. And I think that's going to be addressed as the year goes on here. And I feel pretty confident that they're going to move up this list here pretty soon. I just think Trevor Lawrence, you have, I mean, a extremely strong arm and somebody who can make all the throws and has the mobility to make plays outside the pocket. And if you have that as your recipe, you can stay in any game, or when it really matters, stay in any playoff game.
I considered the Jaguars for my number 10 spot. I also considered the Chargers for my number 10 spot. There were a couple other teams I considered. And the team that I picked ultimately might not even deserve to be a top 10 team in the NFL, but we have to give them some recognition for what they've done in the first 4 weeks of the season. They currently lead their division. And if you were to ask me today who I would pick to win this division, even though we're only barely a quarter of the way into the season, I would pick this team to win this division as they've looked the best and the most consistent through 4 weeks. And that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC South. They are 3-1, and there are a couple reasons that I put them here. First of all, they're 3-1, and their only loss was that Monday night game to one of the better teams in the league, the Philadelphia Eagles. Their defense has been playing really, really damn good football. They fly around. It's a Todd Bowles coach defense. They're well coached. They rank 7th in points allowed at 17 points per game. They rank 2nd, tied with Dallas in takeaways per game at 2.5. So they're taking the ball away from their opponent. They're setting up their offense with shorter fields. And they rank 10th in sacks per game at 3 sacks per game so far. Their quarterback play, which was a question coming into this year with Baker Mayfield, has been actually really, really good. It hasn't been elite, but Baker, he's completing almost 70% of his passes so far, 69.6%. He's got a 7-2 touchdown to interception rate. He's completing he's got 10 yards per completion, so he's throwing the football downfield, and he's got a 101.5 quarterback rating. His weapons have been solid so far. Mike Evans is the ageless wonder. We'll see where that – do you have an update on his injury? I haven't really heard yet. Chris Godwin is a guy that I've always liked. They're at least running the ball somewhat effectively. Their offensive line probably has been the most surprising part for me. It's kind of a patched together offensive line. They're protecting Baker fairly well. I don't know what the PFF stats say, but they've only allowed Baker to be sacked 4 times this year. So I like the way this Buccaneers team is playing. I think they deserve their respect. They're 3-1. This is a team that, if you asked a lot of people at the beginning of the season, thought, was going to really struggle at least. And they're winning football games. I don't think they have a very high ceiling, but if they continue this type of play, playing solid defense, and you get good quarterback play from Baker with some of the weapons that you have, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, they could definitely find themselves winning that division at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing about the Bucs is I think Todd Bowles was written off a little bit too quickly. I think with the addition of Dave Canales onto this staff as the offensive coordinator, a future head coach candidate, by the way, keep an eye on him. With him inserted onto their coaching staff, the offense has looked a lot more competent. And with that, they've been able to sustain drives and give that defense a rest more often, and allow Todd Bowles to have these guys playing fast, which we know Todd Bowles defenses are known to do. So it's really a combination of a lot of different things, but definitely I agree with you in giving the Bucs their credit.
And one more stat here. The Buccaneers offensive line has allowed the fewest quarterback hits in the entire league, 11. So
Interesting.
their offensive line playing really, really well. Now, some of that you could probably attribute to they did play the Eagles front, so there's something to be said for that. I don't really know that they've played the best of defensive fronts, and they'll probably face better ones here in the near future. So we'll see how that continues to progress. But if you protect a quarterback like Baker, give him time to throw with these weapons, and you have a really good defense, that's a damn good recipe for winning a lot of football games.
Hey, exactly. Okay. My number 9 team. I went with the Seattle Seahawks. And it was tough trying to formulate where I wanted to place these kind of um, I don't want to say middle tier, but I guess tier 2 NFC teams, which would consist of the Lions and the Seahawks. But I think the Seahawks right now have shown that their offense, it wasn't a flash in the pan last year. First of all, Geno Smith is legit. He's there, and the defense is taking strides. I've loved what I've seen from Devon Witherspoon. He's already making a big impact, and I know it was against the Giants, but what we saw, Monday night against that Giants offensive line, I mean, they dominated. I mean, you play the team in front of you, and that defensive line has been showing signs of life, and that's really all they need to be a potential dark horse.
I had the Seahawks at number 9 as well. Dominated that game against the Giants. They've won 3 in a row. They're showing that they weren't a fluke from last year. This is a real team. They're a good team. The defensive front, and probably a large portion of this could probably be attributed to what they did on Monday night. I mean, they had 11 sacks. They almost set the record for an NFL team for sacks in a game. Now, some of that has to do with probably the Giants are just horrendous right now in a lot of areas. One being the offensive line, but you gotta take advantage of what's in front of you, and the Seahawks did that. They had 11 sacks. They had 3 takeaways. They had that pick 6 by Devon Witherspoon, who looks to me like, he's gonna. It's hard for me. It's early, but it's hard for me not to kind of look at that guy and say, yeah, he'll find his way to being an All-Pro someday. If he can, the way he plays, if he continues to find himself, making that kind of impact on games for the Seahawks, he'll be the next great one in that secondary, along with some other guys that they have. The defensive front, though, with Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, who they signed from the Chargers a couple off seasons back, Jaron Reed, who's been dominant on the interior. They've generated 98 total pressures, according to Pro Football Focus. That's first in the National Football League. Last season, through 4 games, they had generated 50 total pressures through 4 games. That was 29th in the National Football League. Now, that can be a product of who they've played. That can also just be they're better on the defensive front, and I think it's probably a combination of both. But if they continue getting, if Boye Mafe continues playing like he is, and if Uchenna Nwosu can play like he's playing, with Bobby Wagner, I think still playing at a really, really high level, even at
More advanced age, I guess.
a more advanced age, probably on the back end of his career. And you have playmakers in your secondary. We know Tariq Woolen hasn't been healthy the past couple of weeks, but you have Devon Witherspoon, you have some other guys back there, and you have Geno Smith just playing a solid brand of football with, I think, a pretty good run game. If you look at the stats, it'll tell you that Seattle's probably just above average in terms of the league and where they sit in terms of a running game. But when you think about what they're dealing with both their tackles out with injury, what Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are showing me in the running game, really like their run game. I like what Shane Waldron has done with their offense. It's taken a while for Jackson Smith-Njigba to find his place in that offense, but I mean, when you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett in front of you, I mean, you can somewhat expect that. I think Noah Fant has become a very solid tight end for them. Geno Smith looks great, especially when he gets to the play action. He's completing 83% of his passes on play action this year. He's got the most yards off play action this year, and he's thrown no interceptions off play action this year. We'll see. I think he's fine from the injury. That was a little bit of a scare on Monday night. But for a couple of drives, I thought Drew Lock came in and played pretty good football. And if you're starting, I don't want to take us way off course here, but if you're starting to look at that Russell Wilson trade, boy, oh boy, is it looking like a landslide victory for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. And I'm gonna call Geno Smith play action G from now on. I feel it's only right.
Yeah. So we agree on that. We both have the Seahawks at 9. Who's your number 8?
My number 8. I flip-flopped back and forth with this one. I went with the Detroit Lions. I just thought, it's not a knock on them. I know that I've had them lower in my rankings the last time as well. But what they've shown the past couple of weeks is, they're a legitimate threat to make a run here. Jared Goff has been – what's been most impressive to me is his mental toughness. He throws an early interception against the Packers, a pick six no less, and immediately comes right back down the field, leads I think it was an 80-plus yard drive after a penalty. The poise that he's showing and the confidence that has been, sewn into him by that Lions coaching staff. It's clear to see. He's just flat out a different player from anything we saw with the Rams. And we always knew he was a gifted passer. But the defense, man, that's been the real thing. I underrated that Detroit Lions defensive line. I really did. I was wrong. And Aleem McNeil, Isaiah Buggs, Aiden Hutchinson, all those guys have been making a huge impact on games. I like what I've seen from Jack Campbell as well. They've had him on blitzes. They've had him line up on the edge. They've had him mix up where he's lining up a little bit like a la Micah Parsons almost. I just think that Lions defense is I think it's there. I think they're ready to go in terms of being a playoff ready team.
Another agreement. I had the Detroit Lions at number 8. And hey, I've been probably a little higher on the Lions than you have.
Yeah.
And we both have them in the same spot right now. It's not anything to do with the Lions. It's just, I think once we get past the Lions here, there's a different tier that we're jumping to in terms of level of team, in my opinion. But, we can talk about those sorts of things later on. Did you know that the Lions, dating back to last year, have the longest active streak of games scoring 20 or more points in the National Football League? They've scored 20 or more points dating back to last year in 13 straight games. The second most is the San Francisco 49ers with 10 straight games. Now, you look at that offense, they absolutely ran through the Green Bay Packers defense, which I think is a solid defense, with David Montgomery, who looks like a workhorse back. They also have Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been getting some carries and looks good in spurts behind David Montgomery. That offensive line is just flat out just a solid offensive line, especially in pass protection. They're getting push in the run game. You look at this offense, they add in Sam Laporta. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now you're getting an explosive weapon added to this offense with the reinstatement of one Jameson Williams. I don't know that he'll play this week, but he'll be back soon. And so that's good that adds another dimension to what is already a good Lions offense. Jared Goff, even when he has made mistakes, as you mentioned, doesn't seem like a deer in the headlights. He comes right back, and this Lions offense with Ben Johnson at the helm just continues to put drive after drive together and score touchdowns in the red zone. And the defense, I mean, when you look at this defense, they're first in the NFL in rushing yards allowed, both total and rushing yards per game. When you break it down through the first 4 games of the season, they're only allowing 60 rush yards per game, and they rank second in rush yards per attempt allowed at 3 yards per attempt. And what that does is it allows the second and third levels of that Lions defense to be a little more aggressive, because when you're stopping the run, it makes it easier to generate a pass rush, because you know that team has to throw, and they're in third and longs. And when you look at, I think it's Kaminsky, one of the newer guys on that Detroit defensive front, he's made a great impact in that pass rush. He played really good against Green Bay. You mentioned the other guys, Buggs, who I know because he was formerly a Steeler. Hutchinson, who I think by the end of the season could put himself at least in the conversation. Maybe not being in the elite of the elite tier as a pass rusher, but certainly being, top 10 in the league, if he's not already. And Brian Branch just looks like maybe not to the level of a Devon Witherspoon. I mean, you can argue about this all day, but he looks like a dude in that secondary. The thing is, he's just got to stay on the field because he's had a couple injury scares already.
Yeah, to me, he looks like Tyrann Mathieu Jr. almost.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've already said this. I think they had at least I know it's still early, but at the very least, I think they had a solid draft that's improved this roster. And they look like a team that, is a playoff. They look like a playoff team. I don't know that you can say they're a Super Bowl contender, not yet. But they can make noise we're looking way, way, way down the road, but they certainly look like the favorite in the NFC North. I'll say that.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Number 7. Yeah, this is where it gets more difficult. As you said, there's a definitely a tier jump here from 8 to 7. And I didn't want to overreact to 1 week of football, but at the same time, I think the teams that I've moved ahead of this team have proven themselves. So I moved down the Dolphins this week, and that's not to say that I don't think their ceiling is extremely high. I still think they're Super Bowl contenders. But I think as of right now, I have some questions about Tua Tagovailoa in terms of when there's, adversity and you're in third and long situations, can you make those big plays? And he's shown he can do it. He could do it before, but I just want to continue to see it. Is all I'm trying to say. And then the defense is what really was concerning to me against the Bills. They got ran all over by James Cook. The Bills were like, okay, you're going to play 2 deep shell. We're just going to run it right at you. And they got punished for it. I think with Vic Fangio and those cover 4 style defenses, I've said this before on this show, and I'll say it again. I just think when you're sitting back and you're letting receivers get free releases into the middle of the field, you're just asking to get cooked. I don't hate the Vic Fangio style against a quarterback who's reluctant to take what's given to them in the underneath game, but these quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are too smart now to just sit back in those coverages. I think you got to attack them a little bit. And I'd like to see Vic Fangio adjust and be able to do that, because I think this defense can play a lot better than what they showed on Sunday.
Absolutely. I moved the Dolphins down too, but I still have the Baltimore Ravens at 7. And I mean, you can flip flop the team I have ahead of them, and the Ravens 6-7, however you want to. But I think the Ravens are in that tier of they're, to me, right now the definitive leader in the AFC North. I mean, all the other teams have their fair share of issues to whatever extent those issues are. I mean, that's a different discussion for another day. The Ravens currently have the number 1 red zone offense in the league in terms of converting touchdowns on their red zone trips. They're converting 80% of the time in the red zone touchdowns. That's the best in football. Lamar Jackson is completing 84% of his passes in the red zone, 4 touchdowns, only 1 pick, and a 90-plus passer rating. One of the big differences in this offense right now is not only the better, I guess, passing scheme that Todd Monken has brought to this offense and the weapons that they've brought in. But last year, Lamar Jackson's average time to throw, or average time before throwing, was 3 seconds last year. That ranked 31st in the NFL. This year, his average time to throw is 2.66 seconds. So he's cut off basically a third of a second from the time he gets the snap to the time he throws the ball. That now ranks 7th in the NFL. And he's playing really solid football. Now, this Ravens offense has still yet to go for 30 or more points. But they did just put up 28 on a really good Browns defense. They're going to play another divisional opponent this week in the Steelers, and those games can always be weird. Things can happen in those games. But if you look at what the Ravens have done already to this point, I believe they're 2-0 against the division. They could be. I think it's very likely that they could be 3-0 after this upcoming week against their division. And they do what the Ravens usually do on defense. They stop the run. They're 7th in the league in stopping the run. That's a really good front. We've talked about those edge rushers and the improvements that they've made. I believe they could be getting Marlon Humphrey back in that secondary here pretty soon. You could probably move the Ravens higher. Right now, I still have them at 7. I think they're the clear favorite right now in the AFC North. All the other teams have an issue. I think the Ravens just look like a well-rounded football team right now, well-coached football team. John Harbaugh really solid. That's really all that needs to be said, I think. And they're not healthy. I mean, they haven't really been healthy. They've been missing Tyler Lindenbaum up front. I believe they've been missing
Ronnie Stanley as well.
They've been missing some guys. Marlon Humphrey's one of those guys. Of course, they've been banged up at running back with J.K. Dobbins going down, and he'll be out, I believe, for the year. They've been missing a couple receivers that they're probably getting back, if not this week, next week. This isn't the Ravens that you're going to see in 2 or 3 weeks. They're only going to get stronger. So, yeah.
And that last point you mentioned is one of the many reasons I moved Baltimore up to 6 in my rankings. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think the fact that Lamar already looks this sharp getting the ball out in year 1 of this offense, I think you're going to see that even progress even further than what it is now. You're going to see them get those more explosive plays down the field that we've seen to Zay Flowers and all these weapons. I just think there's another level for them to go to. And paired with that defense, I think was enough for me to move them up ahead of the Miami Dolphins. You mentioned getting Marlon Humphrey back, but even beyond that, I just think just getting somewhat healthy and somewhat stabilized, and the fact that, that was a 7-3 ball game against Cleveland, and they went on a 14-play, 91-yard drive. I mean, that's what elite teams do. They put teams away that they're supposed to be. And that's a very good Cleveland Browns defense, as you mentioned. So I really like what the Baltimore Ravens are doing. And I think what they're doing is going under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, as I said, you could flip flop, I think, these
Yeah.
teams.
I
I
agree.
have the Dolphins at 6. I know. Look, they got beat. They got beat down on Sunday. The Bills reintroduced themselves to the Miami Dolphins and said, "Oh, we're still here." But we know the offense is really, really, really damn good, if not elite. They still lead the NFL in scoring. Right there, I think, with the Bills and the Cowboys and the Niners. I mean, we know that they're creative, they're fast. I don't think did they have Jalen Waddle on Sunday? I get all these injuries mixed up, but we know that offense is good. There's still some questions about Tua, yes, but I think most weeks that offense is going to put up big numbers and be able to be more effective. That's just the Bills defense right now that is playing absolutely out of their minds. You mentioned the defense, though, and that's where a lot of my questions still reside with this Dolphins team. It's got to be better. You talked about the scheme. That obviously we'll see where that goes, but getting stops on third down, they're not doing that right now. And that's something you've got to do to win football games in the NFL. You're allowing conversions on 46% of your third downs on opponents' third downs. That's 25th in the NFL. Not going to cut it. And your run defense has been, I don't want to say terrible, but it's certainly been below average, below league average. You're allowing 123 rushing yards per game. That's ranked 22nd in the league. There are things to be improved upon in that defense, but love Mike McDaniel. I think they check a lot of the boxes, much like a lot of these other teams that we're going to talk about, to be Super Bowl contenders. They still need to figure out a way to play the Bills because the past couple times that they faced the Bills, and I know one of those was that playoff game when they were without Tua, but the past couple times they've played that Bills defense and this Bills roster with Josh Allen, it hasn't been pretty. They've gotten pushed around. Their defense hasn't played all that great yet this season, but I think they have the personnel to do it. They just need to show it. And so you can flip-flop Dolphins, Ravens. I think they'll probably be around the same area all year long. I think both are really, really, really good teams. But yeah, I have Miami at 6. Now we get to our top 5. Who do you have at number 5?
At 5, I have the Dallas Cowboys.
I do too.
And I know, big win here. You didn't want to fall to 2-2 after having such a dominant start. Falling to 2-2 would have just been disastrous. Came out and were dominant against the Patriots. But here's the thing, though. I just think what it really comes down to is the Bills have a higher ceiling because of Josh Allen and Sean McDermott. And number 2 is in those big dominant wins the Cowboys had. And, there's reason to believe that maybe week 3 was just a fluke and a dud. But the 3 wins the Cowboys have had are against teams that are incapable of making comebacks and throwing the football. Like on, third and longs and passing situations and being able to protect. And, I have my questions. I want to see it against a better offense for one, and we'll see that this week against the Niners. So I think that's going to be where I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah, I think we'll learn a lot about Dallas this week. Maybe at least more than we have so far. What we've learned so far is when they face average to below average offensive lines and when they face average to below average quarterbacks, they're going to eat. I
Yeah.
mean, those games are most likely going to end up being blowouts. They have so far to this point. What we wanted to really see this past week was that Arizona game mainly just kind of a blip on the radar, rather than something that we need to worry about. There's something to be said for giving Bill Belichick's his worst loss of his career
Yeah.
in as a Patriots head coach. 35-point beatdown. And their 3 victories this season, although albeit against, you could say, not great competition. They've outscored their opponents 108-13, which is just unheard of in the NFL.
Yeah.
Right now, again, we're just taking these stats in the vacuum. They're 4th in the NFL in points per game. There's still, I think you would agree with this, some struggles down in the red zone some kinks down in the red zone that I'd like to see get a little better. I think that offensive line has done a pretty good job. Tyler Smith, I think. Pro Football Focus has him rated as one of the, if not the best guard in the National Football League right now. He's been absolutely insane. I'll try to find that stat for you. And that defense, we know they're going to take the ball away. They're going to be aggressive. They're going to get to the quarterback. Look, losing Trevon Diggs sucks, but they absolutely, they're making teams look silly. When they have the talent advantage, they're making teams look silly. And when you dominate teams like that in the NFL, you're going to find yourself high in the power rankings. There are questions, and we're going to learn, I think, a good amount about Dallas and where they are right now in this football season on Sunday night.
Yeah, exactly. So just to clarify, you had the Cowboys at 5 as well?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Number 4 now. I have the Buffalo Bills at number 4. It's really tough between 4 and 3, but here's the thing with the Bills. I just think right now, Josh Allen has taken his big step forward, and we've seen him get hot before for 8, 9, 10 weeks on end. What I want to see is just give me this Josh Allen for an entire season. That's what I want to see. That's the last box that's left to be checked. He's picking teams apart in the short passing game, and teams are going to be wanting to give him those throws, and he needs to understand that, and he's starting to. And the running game with James Cook, to me, is the thing that's been opening up the offense even more, because now you're getting a push with the offensive line. You drafted your rookie in Osiris Thomas, who's looked good so far, at least in the running game. And things are really coming together here. And then we already know this defense is legit. And I would even argue this front seven took another leap forward, even without Von Miller in the lineup. Greg Rousseau has arrived. Ed Oliver has arrived. They've been 2 studs all season long for them on that defensive line, and that's been huge for that defense.
Yeah, I had the Bills at 4 as well. I vaulted them from where they were 2 weeks ago up to number 4 inside the top 5 based on what they did to another potential AFC Super Bowl contender on Sunday afternoon. You mentioned it, Josh Allen the past 3 weeks picking teams apart. This is the Josh Allen we want to see. Again, the Bills, I'll continue to say this, they had the Mike Tyson quality. They bring their A game. You could end up face down on the mat in about 14 seconds. They can knock you out. That defense with that defensive front, which I do agree has taken a step forward. They'll be getting Von Miller back soon. Losing White, the corner, that's That's certainly not ideal, but I think they have guys who are ready to step in and be good in that role at the cornerback spot. Like I like McDermott as a defensive coach. The Allen Diggs connection still looks fantastic despite all the drama in the offseason. It looks like they've really rallied after losing that Monday night game. And the biggest development to me for this Bills team is their running game. I don't think we've seen this before, at least in the past couple years with the Bills. They're averaging 138 rushing yards per game on the ground, and not nearly all of that has been Josh Allen. It's been James Cook. It's been the other backs in that backfield. I think the offensive line has gotten better in the run game. They're 8th in the NFL in rushing. Love the Bills. I couldn't move them ahead of any of the next 3 teams, although I think it's pretty close. But yeah, we agree. Dallas at 5, Buffalo at 4.
Yeah, I think the top 5 for us is probably going to be right around the same, I'm guessing. Okay, number 3. I still have the Philadelphia Eagles at 3. And here's the thing with the Eagles. People are going to say, oh, you had to go to overtime at home against Washington. But here's the thing, though. That's a divisional matchup. Washington always plays the Eagles tough. And if you really think about it, Washington's defense is built to limit the strengths of the Eagles offense, which is the offensive line and the running game. And, once, the short passing game started to cook a little bit for Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and those guys, they really started to show the all answers to the puzzle Eagles offense that we knew last year. Like, this was the team that we knew last year that whenever the defense threw something at them, they had something to respond with. And I think we're starting to see that now. And that's why I felt it would have been wrong to move them down a spot after, playing a close game against a division rival.
Yeah, that happens in the NFL. You get those kind of divisional games all the time. It doesn't matter what the rosters say on paper. I mean, it's the National Football League. I think that's a respectable team in the Washington Commanders, who's been playing pretty good football over the course of the first quarter or so of the season. And they got into a grudge match with the divisional rival, although it was kind of more of a shootout than it was a low-scoring, defensive affair. Right. They have the roster. They have a top 3 roster in football still. Look, they've gone through some turnover. They lose both their coordinators. They lose a couple of their linebackers. They lose both of their safeties. They lost a couple pieces off the offensive line, one of which ends up in Pittsburgh. But DeAndre Swift, boy, oh boy, has he looked really, really good. Added another dangerous piece to that running game. People will say, the casuals will say, well, Jalen Hurts doesn't look like Jalen Hurts from last year. Well, actually, the numbers say he looks exactly like the Jalen Hurts from last year. Now, maybe you can say he's been a little worse, at least from a statistical standpoint. But last year, through 4 games, he had 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was completing 66.7% of his passes. He had a 99.6 passer rating, and he had 4 rushing touchdowns with a little over 1,000 passing yards. This year, through 4 games, his numbers are a little worse, but not by much at all. He's got 960 passing yards, so not quite 1,000. He's got 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So 1 more interception, but also 1 more touchdown. He's completing right around the same 67% of his passes. He's actually gone up in completion percentage. He's gone down in passer rating a little bit, and he still has 3 rushing touchdowns. So he's better and worse in a couple statistical categories, but he's basically the same guy as he was last year. So to all the casuals saying that Jalen Hurts isn't the Jalen Hurts from last year, just shut up. And you have A.J. Brown. You have Devontae Smith. You have Dallas Goedert. You run the football. You have that deadly fourth down play, which is basically unstoppable at this point. And you have a pass rush. I think there's still some questions. I don't think they've. The scary thing is they're 4-0, and they haven't played close to a complete game yet, I don't think. And when you look at their schedule, I think there's a good chance that they're 6-0 in 2 weeks when we do this episode again. So, yeah, I mean, it's the Eagles, man. You got to give them the benefit of the doubt until they prove otherwise. Check your mic real fast. I think I've lost you on the audio. I'll keep talking until you figure that out. I'll do my number. We got to improvise here. I'll do my number 2 team. Once we get Emmy back. I know this team probably should be number 1 until otherwise proven, but I actually moved the Chiefs down a little bit. I moved them to number 2 in my power rankings. Look, I don't expect Mahomes to play to the level that he did on Sunday night against what is a good Jets defense. He had one of the worst games that I've ever seen him play. A couple interceptions. But when he had to make plays late, he did that. He did it with his legs, which I think has been like an underrated part of Patrick Mahomes' career so far. He's done that in the playoffs a couple times. He's gotten key first downs with his legs in the regular season now on countless occasions. I like the dimensions of their running game with Pacheco. I like Jerick McKinnon. I like Edwards-Helaire. I think their offensive line's solid. You have Travis Kelce. I mean, Chiefs games have become kind of a spectacle now with Travis Kelce and the whole Taylor Swift thing. That's another story for another day. People will say that they don't like this Chiefs receiving core outside of course, Travis Kelce. I think it's fine. There's some kinks, I think, but it's Andy Reid. You have Patrick Mahomes. You could put him at 1 if you wanted to. You have Chris Jones on your defense. Love the young players in their secondary. Like their linebackers. They're the Chiefs. Now, I think they're going through some September. It's September. Now it's October, but through September, they weren't the dominant Chiefs except when they played the Chicago Bears. I think we'll start to see them get going a little more as we get deeper into the season. I think they're a team that's going to get better. But I did move one team in particular ahead of them for this particular week. But, I mean, I think either one could be ranked number 1. Do we have you back? Do we have you back now? Not yet. Okay, I'll keep going. Well, there's only one team left, for me at least, and that's the San Francisco 49ers, while Emmy has some technical difficulties. I think the Niners, with the way that Brock Purdy's played so far, with the way that Shanahan's running that offense, Christian McCaffrey has now scored a touchdown in 13 consecutive games. That's all of his games with the San Francisco 49ers, which is pretty funny how that worked out. There were some questions about that offensive line coming into the season, and they've played really, really well. Again, I think you can make the argument that between their top 4 in that offense, George Kittle, McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuk. Top to bottom, make the argument. If not, they are the best in the league. And then the defense is just nasty. I mean, you have Greenlaw and who's the other linebacker? Fred Warner. You've got Nick Bosa. You've got Javon Hargrave. You've got they have another younger guy in there who absolutely wrecked the game against Pittsburgh. I'm forgetting his name. I think we have you back though. Can you talk?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Let me just
Goodness.
finish on San Francisco.
Yeah, go ahead.
Defense really, really good. They're 4-0. Purdy playing really, really good football. Again, he's just kind of got to be the I don't want to say the bus driver, but he's just got to be solid.
Yeah.
And this roster, I think you can make the argument it's the best in the league. And until they slow down, I mean, great test this Sunday against the Cowboys. I have the Niners right now as my best team in the league. So you stopped at the Eagles. Give your last thoughts on the Eagles, and then give me your top two.
Well, let's see. What was I going to say about that? I think the biggest thing with the Eagles is the question you may have about them right now is the middle of that defense. They're still waiting on Nakobe Dean to come into his own a little bit in the NFL, and they're replacing two safeties, as you mentioned. So that's really the big question for the Eagles. But other than that, there's really nothing to really be worried about when it comes to them. Now, for my number two team, I kept my ranking the same in the top two this week. I kept the 49ers at two, and it's really only because of Patrick Mahomes. I acknowledge that the 49ers do have the best roster in football. There's no question about that. Their receiving core is just flat out better than anybody else in football, let alone the Chiefs, who are probably, bottom half of the league, if you think about it. But, I mean, that 49ers team across the board right now, not only are they staying healthy, which is huge, but it feels like even if one guy goes down, they don't miss a beat. They just go to the next guy. Like Brandon Ayuk goes down, misses a game, and you didn't even know he was gone. Juwan Jennings stepped in there and was making the same plays Ayuk would have. So it's been extremely impressive, and really all it comes down to me is number 15. And I'll go straight into my points on the Chiefs here. I think their defense is much better, and we've said it for years. You give Mahomes a top 10 defense, I mean, it's really that simple. Like, you give him anybody at receiver at that point. I think the fact that the Chiefs won with Mahomes playing possibly the worst game of his career and knowing that it's probably going to be his one stinker of the year, most likely. I mean, I've said it before on the show. I mean, they're the ultimate figure it out team. They just whenever they're in an adverse situation, they just figure out how to get it done. They just win, man. And Jets fans can cry about the refs all you want, man. I mean, they had chances to win that game. I'm not gonna say they didn't miss calls there at the end, but I mean, at the end of the day, the Chiefs just keep winning football games, even when they're not playing their best football. And that's what great teams do.
Yeah, you have to overcome in the NFL. And the Chiefs overcame some adversity in that football game. They found a way to win. A lot of that was due to number 15 late in the game. And right now, it's early in the season. If from a Super Bowl perspective, I agree with you. You got to put the Chiefs one. I just wanted to highlight the 49ers. And I think those two teams will probably be flip-flopping or right at the top of our power rankings for the foreseeable future, as long as they stay healthy in a couple key spots. So to recap, I'll recap my top 10. You can recap your top 10, and then we can give our parting shots. I have Tampa Bay 10, Seattle 9, Detroit 8, Baltimore 7, Miami 6, Dallas 5, Buffalo 4, Philadelphia 3, Kansas City 2, and San Francisco 1.
All right, and for me, it was Jacksonville at number 10, Seattle at 9, Detroit at 8, the Dolphins at 7, then the Ravens at 6, Cowboys at 5, Bills at 4, then Eagles, Niners, then Chiefs at 1.
Okay, so we're right on time, actually. Any parting shots for today?
Well, right now, the NFL, I mean, last week was one of those weeks where you're like, I mean, the slate of games wasn't super amazing on paper, but I think to me it was one of the most entertaining of the year so far. I mean, you got the Tank Bowl with the Broncos and the Bears to see who could get Caleb Williams. I mean, you basically are imagining Caleb Williams just sitting up in the press box just with the two hats in front of him and waiting on the team to lose, and that's where he'll basically go, presumably. I mean, there's a lot going on in the NFL, and I mean, man, the NFL is king for a reason. They just deliver week after week after week.
They do. The television kings, the kings of all the sports. And look, I mean, this week there are some good games. Jaguars Bills is a game that, although it's early in London, does intrigue me. Tomorrow's game doesn't really do much for me, the Bills and the Commanders. But this weekend, I think Texans Falcons is an interesting game. 2-2 teams. We've seen the way that the Texans have been playing. Let's see if the Falcons can get back on track at home. I think Titans Colts, a divisional matchup, is an interesting game. I think the Colts are a well-coached football team.
Yeah.
So do I think the Titans. I think Ravens Steelers could be interesting. We'll see. There's a chance at least. It sounds like Pickett is going to be able to give it a go. I don't know how healthy he'll be, but we'll see where that goes. If not, they have Trubisky waiting in the wings. I think, although I think there's a good chance the Eagles end up 6-0 after their next two games, the Rams could give them a test in Los Angeles. I could absolutely see that with the way the Rams are playing. And then I think Cowboys-Niners is another interesting game. So I think there are some really good games this upcoming week. And no matter what you think of the slate on paper, I mean, it really just comes down to what happens on the field. And typically, these games over-deliver more 9 times out of 10, more so than they under-deliver, because it's the National Football League. So really excited about the National Football League. If you enjoyed this content, and thank you to our 1 or 2 viewers that have been tuning in since the very start of this episode, we greatly appreciate that. We'll be back in another 2 weeks with another edition of some version, probably a power ranking again. And then a month from now, once we get to about mid-season, we might do something different. We'll see. This will be every 2 weeks. Make sure you go check out our weekly recaps, which we do on Sunday or Monday night. Those will be live. From now on, these shows, unless you guys want us to keep them live, will probably go back to being recorded and probably released on Thursday. But who knows? We will see. It might just vary from a week-to-week basis. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you shortly, hopefully, for Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. And thank you guys for tuning in. Just like the chances of us getting a game 3 in the MLB wildcards round, we are gone. Peace out.
Peace.